Hey, well, welcome to the Dream Labs, Dr. Contrast Live. Well, here we go again, gang. We're back at it, and just want a real quick announcement. Notice I'm missing my lab coat. It's still out being cleaned, and hopefully we'll be back for action next week if we get this program started again here. But I decided to take a moment, and I don't know if you consider it or not, but my new T-shirt line, that's a Porsche piece that's going on the T-shirts and the apparel stuff. So I thought I'd just kind of bring that in and have you take a peek at it. But the more important thing is, boy, it's good to have you back on board, and I missed the final session, for example, where we're going to do the hydrofoil boat, the Catamaran series, and just kind of last week after I finished the stream up on Thursday, I thought, let's take another look at this thing and kind of pull back a bit, and so I decided to go ahead and put together that Ferrari 156 Tipo 156 Formula One car, and it was an interesting exercise to do, so it worked out very well, and those of you who've seen it, I hope you've enjoyed it, and but I think today I just came back to the hydrofoil because I thought, we found some neat things last Thursday. I'm kind of wrapping them up, so I'm going to start here with a bit of a review, and I'll show you what we're taking it from this level here. This is going back to last Thursday, near the end of the stream, for example. We started to put some pieces together, and these are some little pencil sketches after the much conversation about what direction we were taking and what the format was going to be. And it still comes down to one simple thing too, and I think what I've never lost sight of throughout the entire series in wrapping this hopefully up today. And by the way, wrapping it up means just getting the final design down, and I might come back, for example, and do a nice finished illustration at speed on the water, so we can kind of put a lot of atmosphere into this thing. And again, hopefully that'll become a print form and into a t-shirt process as well. But I've never lost sight when I started this whole program about relating what empathy does to actual form studies itself. And again, just for those of you who might have missed that the first few series on this hydrofoil process, I start with an empathy sketch of what it really means to develop an empathy sketch. And it's much more of a personality or an emotional characterization of what you see in your creation and the vision process we go through. Whereas a form study, from my experience and over the years of working with the design process, is form study is already established. It's a shape that's already existing, for example. You begin to embellish it and finesse it, and it becomes a form study. So you're analyzing what to do in terms of how to take it from start to finish. True, empathy has the same kind of characterization, but you're not set on an image, or you're just going through an emotion. It feels fluid. It feels quick. It feels sharp. There's an emotion there that begins to tell you what the storyline is. So all that to say that we have not lost sight of that going through the whole process here from start to finish on this hydrofoil. So let's jump in here. The last Thursday we did some real quick pencil studies. I think the gesture was there, but I kept looking at this thing in terms of how do you resolve this area in here, this nacelle, and again the foil front and rear, how that begins to function and how it works. These quick studies had a lot of character to them, but I thought some of the rear, I tried a rear three-quarter, interesting, get the foils down, and that might have been interesting as opposed to a single tail system back here we're showing. Again, this would be a dual hydrofoil or wing system here, elevation and a little bit of perspective study showing how those things kind of flare off of the normal platform. And while I'm at it too, I never lost sight of the fact that the entire process, when we started it weeks ago, is a very, very fluid form study, or empathy study. But there were three things that I really wanted to hold on to, developing it from week to week, session to session to session. Number one, it was a survival module. Number two, a platform. Number three, a wing system. So those three things really begin to dictate what the shapes are. So we got down to that nitty gritty here in this series of studies here. So this is one set of studies we did. Let me turn the page here. Then it went under an overhead three-quarter, which is now interesting. I mean, we got the Catamaran look. It's got that evil kind of a look to it. And again, it has that platform here, which is here, and the survival cell and the wing system. So it started to all come together here last Thursday. But, and again, there's a little three-quarter front. This is a difficult view to form or concept to illustrate. If you go too high on it, you lose you see a lot of, you come too low on it, you lose some of the dramatic changes in the plan view. So it was a really interesting contrast in terms of putting together the pieces on this whole process. But I began to really see that this has some merit to it. And do I want to join it and go to a single sponson and then dual back here with the wing system? Or do I want to go back and just open this up again and open this up and keep that fluid up front there? So it's more of a double and a double foil system back here. So that was the second that we did. And then over here, back to some elevations again. And this started to take on some character as well. I looked at it and say, well, maybe the cantilever, the survival cell floats a little bit, and it's above the surface, and it's just a big platform. You see a little bit of the plan shape here, but then I started to get back to, kept the dual foils back here, and then split the almost like the walrus look up front with the sponsons and the foils. But then I looked at the body side. Now, it's still, is it sheared like this? Do we want to go crisp with it again and keep it very blocky and vertical, or do we want to get more organic with it? So I looked at some of these shapes here. This elevation started to take on some real character to it. I really liked the idea that we kept that survival module real minimal and a big platform out there, and then a lot of stretch in the cantilever to get those front sponsons to work for us here. So that was a last little pencil sketch we did on that guy. And then we just kind of switched gears and went to some newsprint studies, looking at from front and rear, and then changing. When I went through this sketch here, this studies here, began to see maybe there's a nice lonesome area here. This survival cell comes through, then it just drops into a vertical tail foil system that we're going to show you here. So these last sketches begin to show us that in terms of the plan view. Does it come back out and break again in a very, very life looking very simple? Kept that needle nose almost, tightened up the cantilever a little bit here. That was part of the process. And a little elevation sketch here showing the front view of the section study perhaps. Then I came back again and looked at, this was basically the idea in this plan view, looking at the elevation, survival cell, and a very simple, almost like a dart type tail on this thing with a foil coming off the rear. But then again, a little 3/4 study and here. So that was one way we ended up beginning to look at that. So, well, that's got some potential. Maybe this is the way we want to go. But the idea of keeping that survival cell coming up underneath and keeping that whole thing almost like a floating egg set survival cell in the middle of these two sponsons, this platform, was to me a very intriguing thing. And again, with the foils, the three elements there. So again, little 3/4 sketch showing what that does. Interesting form to this sketch. If you come down too low on it, you lose that break, for example, in the plan view. So I kept that pretty crisp here for the benefit of seeing what that plan view does. We don't catch this. Again, I understand. Pardon me. If you come down too low on this, that whole front end section breaks away from you, and you begin to, it almost distorts the shape. So I had to cheat the view, and that was one of the good challenges about this exercise as well. Really, it was a good challenge mentally about how to visualize this shape and make it work well in terms of putting together the concept. So let me just move that around here. That was a sketch. And the last one we did was a little pencil sketch, real quick little form study here. This was interesting here. I kept that pretty true to form here. Then the more I looked at this, it kind of clumsy in here as far as the weights were concerned. We want to keep it fluid, or we want to keep it crisp. What's the combination we're after here? So after that sketch, this was the last thing we did on Thursday of last week on this foil study. I think the shapes are there, the drama is there. There's a pretty evil-looking form as far as depiction goes, but I think there's something missing in it. And so let me just kind of jump over to. So I started working on, for example, on Tuesday of this week, a whole new family of forms here. So I just went back and reevaluated what this thing will look like. So I started with these little thumbnail sketches back again. Notice the relationship again. We came back to this page here. Yeah, pardon me. I'm going to get this and pick this up. I came back to this plan view right here, and let me kind of line them up here just a bit. I came back to this plan view and kind of sweetened it a little bit, and maybe took some of the fracture out of it. But instead of I kept that same shape coming out the back of that form and rolling it right into the actual sponsons themselves, or the two catamaran cantilevers that were out there. Interesting. So I just kind of played off of this and got to this first sketch here, and this first pass of studies. Then began to take a look at, okay, what does this now look like? There's a plan view that might be interesting. And all of a sudden begin to develop that plan view into a couple of elevations, and there was something interesting that began to happen. Notice I went back to this very almost round, almost fish-like, fluid-looking form to it, as opposed to the very sheer. Again, let me bring this one back. How these sketches, for example, begin to pick up a lot of this very sheer-looking drop-off in this plan form here, and the platform began to drop vertically, and it was much less organic, and maybe not as fluid-looking or as aquatic-looking. So I went back to that very round surface here. This whole thing has gotten a real transformation from start to finish. So these studies, plan view and then elevation, long and thin, lots of platform up front, and again, all of a sudden, things start to kick here. Now, this is starting to look like it's got some real interest to it, but there was still something missing. How do you begin to relate this to a certain situation or give it a storyline? And after I completed this page of sketches, I went right back in and said, okay, let's go to another study. Let's look at this little research. What this reminds me of, and it's really kind of, I was getting a shadow the other day looking at some of these sketches. This reminds me of, there's something familiar about this, saying that, but what is it? And I wanted to relate it to something that was tangible, then take it into the abstract. And lo and behold, the more I looked at this thing, the more I began to think of water bug. Sure enough, water bug. And I thought, that's interesting because it flies on the surface. It just skips through the surface. It doesn't nest in it, but it sits on the surface and flies. But it has some contact to it. So then Shadow comes along and says, hey, that's kind of neat. And that's there's a water bug out there that's called the, I think it's called the, let me turn the page here. Let me just go back to this. The water strider. That was the name of the insect itself. So I looked it up and did a little research on this thing, and sure enough, really phenomenal how this whole thing, I said, that's the click. That's what we need. That's a connection between the empathic approach to the emotion. It feels like it's a water bug, as opposed to a form study already predetermined. Then we transfer that into this whole concept of having this hydrofoil catamaran. Really interesting. So, interesting. Look at what happens here. Here's an actual little plan view study of what that strider looks like. Very thin body, has a series of 6 legs that kind of just skips across the top of the water. And it's interesting that the front legs are for hunting, they're for prey. And the middles are paddle legs. So they just kind of paddle you through the water itself. You just kind of skip through the whole process. And the rear legs are for steering in direction. But what I thought was interesting about this, I just knocked out, for example, that and that. And I just used that whole area right here, the body form itself, and then the cantilever coming off the front legs, and began to transfer that into a plan view. And there it is. So if I took that same plan view of the strider, pardon me, and put it into action, there's the plan view again we came back to that we were talking about earlier, this guy right here. So there's a relationship side by side here. There's a relationship after. I mean, I really started to feel like, no, this has got some merit to it now. It's got some real, there's a story behind this now that's beginning to tell us how we're going to develop this thing. So let's just lay those out there, and I'll take a moment here and kind of let you absorb this thing. This is kind of a neat process in terms of, all right, we started in the abstract, brought in something that's fundamental, went back to a very fundamental truth, abstract, or an element in via mimicry, and brought it back into this abstract concept for a hydrofoil boat. Interesting. There we are. That was done first. Elevations are right back to the research side, then right back into the plan view again. It started to justify and make sense of what we're looking at here. So very interesting set of circumstances. So that guy went up by the wayside. Then I moved to this one, and this is looking at the research, got that water strider on top there, really kind of neat. I mentioned I haven't had a chance yet to work on this, but I will be when we wrap it up. Give it a designation, for example. I'm going to call it the H2S. And hydrogen-powered strider, dual system, dual power. So that's going to be part of the logo. We put this all together here. A lot of fun. And can take it from start to finish and just really wrap it up as a story from start, abstract, empathy into a final presentation here of what this catamaran hydrofoil is going to look like. So that's the research side. Back to the planning. Now from there, I started to just jump into some, again, pencil sketches. Now, this began to make more sense to me now. There's an overhead 3/4, and it just looked much stronger. It's being organic. It's just these 2 cantilevers, very round, very sheer up on top, where we needed to be a platform, and underneath going into a very round surface, like the sections showing us here. This might be a bit weighty here, but the reason I put that mass into this body side here was to justify where the hydrogen cells are going to nestle. Maybe they're vertical and they're stacked side by side in this whole area back here, and then the propulsion system behind it we exhausted on through. Again, notice a double canard with the foil here up front to kind of stabilize it on the water, and a single tail back here to kind of give us a 3-point stance in the water when it begins to build up speed and begins to fly. So that was a little pencil sketch done to it to get that all put into action. So I went from that page into the next page, which was this guy. And just kind of organize these guys here. Let's see. Just at this. Pardon me for just kind of regrouping here for a moment. Interesting study. So I went right back in and looked at a couple of more fundamental detail sketches about what this thing might look like, and again, back in stance. Here's another elevation of what it started. It looks so much healthier, being much rounder or more organic. I don't know how you guys feel about it here, but just give me a shout out, yay or nay. I think I personally feel that the rounder form is far stronger than the sheer body side or the cantilevers that we're looking at in some of the earlier sketches. This view especially proved it to me. That little overhead 3/4 started to really sing in terms of, that's a lot softer, a lot more fluid, less aggressive. Less aggressive from the shear point of view, but more aggressive from the organic point of view. So that was really interesting. And again, this is a rear 3/4, really simple. And again, notice how I had to cheat that view. You don't see that. You would not see that that first quarter of that sketch. That all fades away because of the plan view shape that breaks. Notice it breaks here, but I didn't break. I just cheated the shape to kind of get the idea down and to come out with this foil underneath and then a twin exhaust in this large intake as it begins to float. This is where the breather is going to be. It comes back in and then exhausts through in the hydrogen system for propulsion here. Little detail, again, the cockpit area. Didn't know if I wanted to go those overhead jets and that thing, but it just, again, told the story. So that was another series of little sketches I did there. And let me just take a second here, okay, and just get your opinion. What do you think thus far? Progress, no progress, likes, dislikes, anybody? Doug and the Shadow, if you're there, boy, I really appreciate it. I need the help I can get. This has been a real good struggle in terms of learning how to go through the process and begin to make some sense out of it all. But from my perspective, what really hit home when I put it all together, when I started putting all the pieces together, was going back into the research base to find this water strider. That made it all possible, and I thought, that justifies it. There's just something there to work with. There's something really neat about going back into something like this to really tell your story with it. That's the relationship that you're trying to build. Again, the empathy to the actual product itself, empathy to form. Beautiful. I mean, it just really all fit together, and I really thank Shadow for bringing that up to us. And this reminds me of, yeah, sure enough, that's what I wanted. This skipper, this kind of a strider across the top of the water that really does the job here. So let me move along here. There we are. Now, from those sketches, I went back in and began to develop these guys. These are just really quick little line studies here. But now I went right back in and started to put some heat to this thing. Interesting. All of a sudden, it's all began to come together. Notice a very cheated view here, again, elevation into perspective, and then again, just kind of tipping a little bit to put that into place. So just really neat stuff. So let's kind of do this just for what it's worth. Let's put a little bit of tone in this thing and just kind of come through it. Let's just come back in. So what does it look like here? It softens off here, comes back in, intake here. Shadow in the intake. So there it goes here. Up that down just a bit. In the canopy, just hit the high spot. Some of the high contrast areas here. Canopy. And again, just a little softness. A little bit of a air breather. In the shape again. Let's highlight where that vacuole is here. What that looks like. And again, right back in through here. Exhaust area. Into that real hard shear platform break. Into the body form in the upper. Let's kind of take this into play here. It's real soft. Just enough to give it some distinction. And again, cast shadow across that foil. Put a brake line in through here. Take that on through. Reverse sailing kick here. Again, front point sponson. It's a line weight study more than anything else. That spear comes right through upper platform. I added that upper line just so you can actually see what the shape is doing up on top here. It's actually going to break the other way. I'll show you that in a moment. Now, and this view is interesting. Now, all this becomes negative. That's the other portion of the underbody side. That's got it. That's that. That comes in into the survival cell. Into the form itself. Into that shell of that form there. Takes me through. A little bit of that breather. A little bit of a line break here. There's this companion on the other side. This comes through. This is where the cantilevers pull off of the front canard, stabilizing it. The overhang of the spear. Again, a little bit of body side in here. That intake. I'll move this over just a bit here. Cockpit. Sponson. Shadow. Into that foil. Let me sharpen this guy up a bit here. Oop, I'm going to move this back into place here. There it is. A shadow inside that vacuum. I'm going to turn this upside down. A little bit of line thrust off of this exhaust system here into the underbody. And we'll finish this off with just a little bit of the shadow in through here. That's that far side sponson. Right. Oops. Pardon me. Let's get this guy in place. There it is. There. Into there. Drawing right through this guy. That front canard. And then into this one. Rear wing, rear foil, a little bit of a side kick on it. A little more shadow in this guy. And there it is. There's another little view there. I don't know, guys, you're pretty quiet. What do you think of this? This making sense now? It seems much more aquatic looking. There's less of the sheerness involved in here. I think it's got some real character to it. So I think we made some real progress here in the last couple of days, especially from last Thursday. I just kind of pulled away from it. I thought it was very helpful for me to do that, as I could see things a little more clearly and begin to make some decisions on where to go with this guy. Let's do this overhead here just real quickly. Part of the canard. Let's just knock that out. For the underbody and the actual cell itself. It's going to go into shadow. Cockpit area. Intake, a little bit of shadow in this guy. Let's get this inside line here. Let's cast a shadow off of that guy. Move back inside that body form there. There it is. Air dumping through here. His companion over there. Get this guy back in place here. Tail section. All right. Well, there's one, guys. What do you think? I'm along all right here. Anybody? Any input at all? Any yays and nays? Let me try something here. Why are you doing that? I mean, that's got to dig out some of this stuff. So you put a little more impact in this beauty here. And for what it's worth here, a little bit of highlight in this thing, put a little bit of color to it. Hey, Demetrius, how are you? I love how you took the insect and designed it. Yeah, that's the secret behind what I refer. Thanks, Demetrius. I'm glad you're tuned in. Hope you're doing well. But that's what I think is really neat about the empathic approach to it all. How you take that biomimicry, like that one sketch we showed you. This was the pivot point right here. When I discovered, thanks to Shadow, what that insect was doing, there it is. That began to take it into the form of what this hydrofoil was going to look like. So really appreciate you bringing that up, Demetrius, and I hope you're doing well. Good to have you on board. It's going to come back in there and put a little bit of this into it. Just want to scream in just a touch here. And we'll just take this guy and kind of move it out a little bit. Run it through. And just take the same thing through here. A little bit of direct application here. Knock it right in there. Oh, lost my spray book pad here. There it is. Now let's come back in and pick up the old eraser trick, which always works very well. Let me put that over here so I know where it is. And we'll come back to this guy. Pardon me just for a moment. Bring this edge up just a bit. That all set up. Do that and get this all put together. So I'm going to leave that in a second here. Let's get rid of this thing here. And there it is. There's a couple little empathic passes here. Let's put a little bit more touch of that color in here just for a moment. A little further back. And inside this, there you are. And let's get back to some highlighting through here. And again here. I'm a firm believer, if it ain't fun, don't do it. So there you are, gang. There's a little thumbnail sketch. Coming back to, coming back to the theme that I think is really starting to make sense here. Interesting series of sketches here. The story, I think the story is being told much more clearly. I think it's got some real form to it here. Interesting. This whole thing almost dives into the water now. It's got an interesting look to it. While I'm at it here, let's do this. I forgot to add this. While at speed, let's call that water line about right here. Let's topping that off just a bit. And convey that it is at speed. Let's rooster tail this thing. There you go. Now that's fun. Just put a little bit of action to it here. Got to give a little more character to the sketch itself. And there we are. There she is. I think it's got some real presence now, and I think what I might just before I went live, I thought, you know, it'd be kind of fun to do with this process here is to take it from these pencil sketches and let me do this. Pardon me, I just want to make sure I get this all lined up here. Get that highlight to read through on top of that canopy. There it is, and then bring that on back. There we are. It's kind of fun to do this. I think we kind of need to give this thing a Ferrari designation and do the final illustration on red canson, or else on white canson, red boat, and water systems with a lot of rooster tail in it. What do you think, gang? That might work pretty good. That could be a lot of fun. So there's a family of little form studies here that we just, again, from that whole generation last week about slowing it all down, looking at biomimicry, bringing it right back in to the reality of the final object itself. And believe me, Demetrius, I really think that's a great commentary. Thank you for bringing that up. The insect, that's what triggered it all. I just needed something to rationalize what this thing was going to do as opposed to just an exercise and doing sketches. But there was something behind it that supported the concept. And again, this whole, that water strider did it. And that was Shadow's idea. Say, oh yeah, it's a water strider. He knew about it. I didn't. That was great. So thank you, Shadow, if you're still listening. Very cool. Doug, hope you're well. So that's, I finished that family of sketches. And let's go back and did another plate here, just another family. Do we want to go with this approach, which is interesting? This approach here, which is that single tail. So we have 3 points of contact here on this guy. Or do we also go back here and go through this almost this dual thing, just almost like these America's Cup forms that come off the back of that platform and begin to shape this thing like so. Let's do a little bit of that same thing through here. Just gonna get this in place. Real simple. Make sure I've got these lines here. Intake area. A little bit of the shadow across that form. Let's get that survival cell. Kind of nail that down the underside of that, the belly side of this nacelle here. In cockpit area. And again, this is oh, sorry about that. You see it all right? There we go. And again, is it this look? Our music turns upside down. Exhaust area here. So that's another form study there. Just kind of bring all that whole vacuum form together here. Really interesting shape studies here. And again, a little bit of an elevation, bringing this survival cell through. Intake. Cockpit area. Underbelly. Let's do this too. And last but not least, we just finish up the sun elevation here. I just went through a page of just form studies, but maybe it's more of this almost America's Cup kind of foil system at the back of this thing that kind of floats in. It gives me a 4-point stance down in the water as opposed to maybe the 3-point that we just finished here a moment ago. So let me just kind of wrap this up. Maybe this one wraps over the top of this thing. It comes off the top of that shroud area. It comes right off that platform, off of this shape here, just drops in. I'm not sure which way I want to go with this guy yet, but just exploring. I don't know, gang, what do you think? There she is. There's another little family of form studies here, but what we're looking at here is a little bit on the weighty side on this guy, but I think, I still think the allure or the intrigue of this shape is to have that very formal, almost round, almost fish-like underbelly on this thing with these very sheer pods and catamarans coming off the form itself. So let's do this. It's the same kind of treatment. Just kind of brush this in here. Pick up a little more end pack back in through here. And here. Get that eraser up, save the day, hopefully. This brush will clean this up a bit here. Come back in and pick up a little bit of impact here with some highlight eraser work. Let's get this guy to blend in a bit more. There it is. And let's get some hot spot on this guy. A little excitement in the sketch here, I hope. And like we did the last time, let's put a bit of water line in this guy so we know where we're sitting with this guy. And rooster tail it. There we are. It kind of gives a little bit of drama to it. There's another little series of studies there, guys. There should be, let me put this aside here for a moment, and let me sharpen the stick and get back to that storyline here. I'm going to finish the sketch up a little bit here. And one last thing here. Well, my hope is that we've kind of come to a conclusion here that this is a really interesting form to deal with and put it in some final context here. When you think you will do the final rendering, love to see the final on this one. Yeah, I think I'm going to start doing that probably next week, I think, Demetrius. I think I'm going to take a moment here, kind of re-evaluate here and do a nice lines. I picked the right view. I think I don't know if I picked this up earlier or not, if you picked up in my conversation. But what's really interesting about this shape is it's such a difficult form to follow because it breaks in plan view quite a bit. It's got a lot of offset in it here. Let's just do this for a moment. I'm talking about the offset here. There's such a break in the plan view. If I pick a low 3/4 on it, then you lose that much of it, for example, and you lose this, but you see the break itself. So it's going to be a tough view to pick on. And some of the other sketches I did too, I think back here, just for what it's worth. I'm going to bring these back in for review here. That was it started it. There's two. This one I think really told the story on the rear 3/4. I think if I saw this or not. But that rear 3/4, look how much plan view break there is in that thing. So if I come down low in this thing from the rear, you won't see that front portion at all because it breaks away from you. So I think I'm going to have to take some time here, and it won't take a lot of time, but I'm going to spend some time tomorrow in the office here in the studio, just picking up the right view, getting the right view. I don't know if it's going to be from looking right at it or coming at me, or what I want to do with this thing, but it's a real challenging shape to illustrate. And when I put it all together for final illustration, I do not want to use a view, for example, that's going to be boring to no end, and we miss some of the intrigue of what we're after. It might come down to something like this. Let me do a real quick little study here. I don't know if this is going to work at all or not, but it might come down to this, where we can right back down to, maybe it's a full one point perspective looking right at it, where you have this survival cell, and you have the contact here. You come out in perspective, run it across, and then begin to bring it back towards center line, which is right here. Again, break up that same distance from there to there. Let's see what that does. Let's turn this upside down so I can get a better gauge on where the scale might be. So for what it's worth, that's probably about maybe a full pencil length there. Let's kind of put that over here and do that. That's not bad. Maybe it's this. Now it comes back to this. Now, the fun parts, tangent to tangent. That comes out here. And breaks into that pinch. The body side. And again, dropping in the center line. Coming into that pinch. Let me make sure I get that down here. I'm not sure if this is the way I want to go or not. So this thing breaks along that body side, and you'll see a little bit of that tail section back there doing this. And you'll see, if we go with that double canard thing, you'll see that coming off the back and doing this. And then we come back up front again, split that body side on this thing. Well, let's pick up the darts. So there's my perspective. The recon darts. The recon darts. Now, where that sponson takes place, it's right about here. Run across it. Notice, even in the construction setup, you're always working the perspective. This is that front canard that holds the cantilever together here. It's that, doing that. We've got those little offsets here, those little air dumps that come in here. And come in here. Now, this is the fun part, structure. It's the underbelly. Off of that underbelly comes that round shape, which you lose right about there. It's a really strange looking, almost crab-like. Underbelly. Now, let's get that platform in place here. Or that's see what we're doing there? Pardon me, I'm off the screen here. Look at that. There's that thing in the front view. That's a bit out of perspective here, but nonetheless. So that. Coming over to more of that. So almost from the front view, how really strange that that's just something really bothers me about that whole sketch here. Hang on a second here, guys. I just don't believe that's where we want to go with this thing. And then they've got these two sponsons that come off of here. Just give me the oh, it's almost, I know, you know, we can see we're off here. And again, cockpit. So it's an odd view to work with. I'm not really quite sure that's the right thing to do. I just don't think that's really the right view here. Now, maybe it might be something that looks more like this. We'll see what takes place here if we come back in. A real quick gesture. It could be more of a tight 3/4 front that has more of this kind of character, just like we're showing here. This to this. Center line. Brake, platform, yeah, keep coming back to that same 3/4 front look, because I think that gives us more of a definite shape in terms of what the form is actually doing. It doesn't force it, it doesn't pinch it. There's just something right about that view right there. Maybe that's it at water. I mean, this thing, that speed here, we get the drama things down here. then the intake itself. Get that cockpit to kind of slim up a little bit more. And again, take that center line over here and drop it back just a touch more, like so, into that area there. I still think that's the view we're looking for. It just really, it's going to come down to something very close to this view right here, where it's at the right view. You see all the shapes, the forms, it's not distorted. And that one point dead on is just it's just lethal looking. It just doesn't look right at all. It's a very silly approach. It gives you the overall form, but it's too steep. Maybe we drop the element more and flatten the whole thing out. But the more you do that, the more it distorts the shape. So go back to what I said earlier in the beginning of the stream. This is a very good exercise in learning how to pick the right view, because the forms and the shapes are so complicated, very sheer in some areas, very organic in others. It really kind of puts a twist on some things, and it slow it all down and say, okay, what's the right view? So that's going to be my task between now and next week, to take a look at where we are here. So let me go back and review some of the things we just did here today, and we'll call it a day. How's that? So let's get those guys lined up. We started here. I want to come right back to this, and right back in with some really neat stuff in terms of from last week. We started to look at a basic theme, went back to more of an organic look here, did these little thumbnail sketches just the other day, and we started to look at this view looks a bit better. I think the front view is, it's too wide. You're right, Demetrius, it distorts the shape. You can't get the overall character of the cantilever because you're playing much more of the break as opposed to the actual pinch itself that comes together here. So good point. Thank you very much. Again, started here, plan view, and then did a couple of elevations. I thought, you know what I have to do is justify it. What am I looking for? What's going to be the empathic side of this? It gives me the fundamental form. What's the emotion? And I thought, you know what? I want this thing to skip across the water. So that's kind of neat. So when Shadow came in and said, hey, you got to look at the water bugs. And there's one called a water strider. And sure enough, he was right. There it is. That's what this thing looks like in plan view. And I just picked up, as Demetrius said, I just picked up the body form and the front legs, which are used for hunting or for prey. And in this case, we're looking at speed and athleticism. But interesting, but that was the theme. That was the biomimicry piece that pushed the whole thing together and began to justify this whole program about the Catamaran hydrofoil. Really interesting stuff. So from there, went back to some basic thumbnail sketches. Let me just roll those over. And again, this overhead 3/4, started to put this piece together. And again, notice body form, long front legs like the strider, and that's it. And then a little bit of a plan view. Might reanalyze this shape in terms of these catamarans. These cells are opened up for hydrogen storage, etc., for the power source itself. So there we are there with that guy, a little study done. And I went back in again and looking at just some basic overall shapes. And I was really pleased with the fact that when it was all said and done, this organic look was so much healthier than going to the sheer body side we had done last week. So that's where we are here, gang. Just kind of a brief overview. Then went back to the final two sketches we did, for example, so we started here, put a little bit of an elevation together on that form and just put a little bit of color and some pastel to it to kind of give some character. This one really I think, you know what, Demetrius, what do you think? If you're still there, this view here to me tells a neat story. It's a right angle. It shows all the goodies. It doesn't distort the shapes. So I'll take a consensus here. Doug, if you're there, and also Shadow, you're there, still peeking in, and Demetrius, what do you think? This view to me, as opposed to this, is a little bit too high. That just seems to be just about right. You're maybe about 4 or 5 feet above normal eye level, which would be about a 10-foot down slope view into the shape itself. This one, I think that's the one I really think we ought to play up on. So last but not least, that was done. And then we went to this plate, just looked at some additional details. And that concludes today's session in terms of sketches. And I want to close with this. I think when it's all said and done now, I'm really looking forward to putting this thing into a final rendering, Demetrius. So what I'm going to do is analyze, let's say this is Ferrari, a red boat on a nice Canson, maybe a light gray or an off-white, with red boat at speed on the water and with a lot of rooster tail. To me, that's what this thing is going to look like. I mean, you could do some really cool stuff here with a screaming red form and really do some neat stuff with the shapes and play up some of the graphics a la Ferrari. So that's it. Maybe it might just end up being a very simple all-white boat. I will see. But I definitely want to plan it out, put some background sketches together, some little thumbnail studies, and then we'll start this program again next week. I want to get it all wrapped up. If maybe Tuesday or Thursday next week, I'll do the final reading, but I'll make the announcement. We'll little in advance as we go through the process here, gang. So once again, I cannot thank you enough, all of you, for tuning in today. Boy, pardon me, losing my voice. For tuning in today. Great fun. I think we really have, I think, a resolve here in terms of getting things done. Long process, but again, worthwhile. Things began to come together last week, and especially when I got to this biomimicry piece, it all of a sudden all fell into place. So all that to say, we're well on our way to getting a final design down, which was today's stream was all about. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week. I hope you have a great weekend. And before I leave here, please feel free to drop me a line at Dr. Contrast, or look at my website rather, at drcontrast.com, with some interesting things that are going on. We're adding some things to it as we're trying to get the store finalized with Shadow and some other individuals we're working with. All this stuff will be loaded into it with t-shirts and some poster graphics. Some of the stuff I'm doing here, like the Porsche, Ferrari, and Lamborghini, all that'll be in t-shirt format. So that's coming. If you have anything you want me to work on individually or help you with, and again, I'm not being presumptuous here, if I can be of any assistance to you, please drop me a note at jim@drcontrast.com. I'd love to help you. I mean, there's a lot of things I go through that are problematic from day to day, and I exercise some things and go back to basic studies, and I think that's really been helpful. So if I can help you there, terrific. Once again, thank you so much. I've enjoyed having you on board today. This has been a great project. I've really enjoyed putting it all together. And Wanderer, if you look at it later on, if you're going to be tuning in, I hope this has been of some help to you. Please feel free to drop me a note and keep feeding me some of your sketches. I really am making a lot of progress the last batch I had seen. So if you look at this program today, drop me a note about yays and nays, what you liked and disliked, and look forward to seeing your work again. And all that to say, in conclusion, I always close with this because I think it's the most important part of the stream. It's always critical to me. Simply this: never forget to remember to dare to be great, because you are. Thanks again, gang. All the best, and take great care. Thank you.